Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Anja Petkovic, and I'm project manager at the Center for Euro-Atlantic Studies. And together with the colleagues from Slovakia MESA 10, we are organizing the 6th round of student debates, where we have students from Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, Slovakia, and Moldova, some kind of competition in debating. It all started with just the students from Serbia and Slovakia, but then later we had even more universities included in the debate process. Now we are here in Belgrade, where students are going to have the first round of the debates, and the second one is going to be in April in Slovakia. Also, we included the visit to European Parliament, and the students are going to write policy briefs and recommendations, and they're going to have an opportunity to present them to the members of the European Parliament in April. I am going to start. We are going to start with the first question, and I'm going to read the first question, and then I will call first two teams to stand here and give their remarks. First, I would like to ask the students when they're answering the questions to not read. Please, this is like you can have small notes, but this is the so. Okay, the first question. First question is China a partner or an opponent of the EU and NATO? What is your opinion, and how do you evaluate activities of China in your home country? I would like to ask team Tomasz Duriš from Bratislava and Slaven Minić from Podgorica to have the first answer. Okay, you have 2 minutes, and I will time.
I do not know.
Okay.
Okay. So, China's relations with NATO and European Union. NATO is political and military alliance. Because of that, China does not have influence through its economy in that matter as it has on the EU. We think that China is making some initiative, serious steps through the One Belt, One Road initiative, which means that China is investing all around the world because she wants to buy some governments because of easy credits. Easy credits are allowing to China to present itself as a good ally to the countries to which credits are given. Because of that, China is now allowed to make some military bases like the one in Djibouti. Because of that, China is having a lot of presence in Latin America. And because of that, we think that China in the future will have the primate to US, and the China will become world number superpower. We think that China is already right now experimenting in South China Sea and is already experimenting as North Korea as a bargaining chip. And because of that, we think this influence will grow more and that it will eventually dispute the US power. From the other side, we do not think that China can ever think that it is the friend or an ally of European Union, but it is hardly to be said that it is an opponent because it has a lot of investment in EU and there is much trade going on through these countries. It is measured in approximately 500 billions a year, and it is some serious trade exchange. Because of that, China and EU have to have some relations, but on the other hand, there is a huge problem between these two countries because of the China is constantly harming the human rights. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, so my opinion on this one is, first of all, I'm going to tell something about the Slovakian ties with the China, and then I will present my statement of the main question. So first of all, the China is not a strategic partner for the Slovakia. Only 2.2% of our trade, our mutual trade, is there. It's only through some minor investments. But this can in future pretty much changed because the China announced the purchase of US Steel, which is one of the biggest steel making companies in Europe. Also, this could change because of a project, as you mentioned, One Belt, One Road, because the Slovakia is one of the possible places for the trains to go through the country. State Secretary of the Ministry of Finance said that this is pretty good opportunity for Slovakia. We actually strongly disagree with this statement. First of all, China can violate or can use this project One Belt One Road for their personal aims. For example, it can pretty much increase the number of the stuff going from China to Europe, which will means even more dumping prices and also some lobbying within the European Union. The second thing is that Russia could actually use this project to somehow avoid the sanctions from the European Union. Also, the more stuff which is going from the China to Europe will means even more dumping prices and even worse concurrence area in the European Union. It's mainly because, as we could see in the last year, there were a few countries, including Slovakia, which has been actually which helped China to avoid the taxes and customs. Also, there are like yeah. One moment.
Time is up.
That's all.
Sorry.
Okay, so can I just finish my?
One sentence.
Okay, so we think that China is not the strategic partner for the European Union right now, even though we know that the European Union and China's mutual trade is really important. But in some cases, for example, for NATO, China is important partners.
Thank you, both of you. I will now call the teams Moldova, Novi Sad, and Banska Bystrica. Tatiana Auzek from Moldova, George Ivanovic from Novi Sad, and Daria Vezruko from Banska Bystrica. Daria. Please bear in mind that you have 2 minutes, so it should be very brief. Your teams will have more time during the questions. So yeah. Okay. You can start.
So the question, can you repeat?
You're all answering the first question about the China, so you can start.
Again. Okay, well, I think I'm gonna look to the personal relations between China and my country. The other colleagues were talking about some global things, so I would focus on something more local. China is investing more and more in Serbia, I mean, as well as some other Western countries, but their investments are being portrayed as something revolutionary, something that is, well, big amounts of money, like $1 billion here, $1.5 billion there, and so on. But behind that, there is, I think there's, they're being misrepresented in some cases. For example, they did buy the steel plant and the mine called Bor, which helped Serbia in a way that Serbia was paying the debts of those companies every year because they were rotting. So China bought them and put them to work. So at least Serbia doesn't have that obligation anymore to fill those debts. But on the other hand, they were building some infrastructures like roads and so on. And that was being represented as they came here to build road for us. And it's a great investment, where the truth is that they didn't build it for themselves. They were just basically they were just the constructors. The Serbian government paid for it. They took the loan from them so they could pay their workers to make infrastructure. So some of those investments are, well, plainly in a way good. Some of them are just, not bad essentially, but are not represented as truthful as they could be. When talking about the global scene, of course, China is booming. Its economy is booming, and of course, Europe and Africa and more and more countries are involved in that influence. I believe that they will cooperate on some basic levels with NATO and with Russia when talking about, I think, fighting terrorism or some basic economic questions and trade. Because, as we know, a lot of companies, Western companies, have their factories, like Apple, Samsung, big companies, have their factories in China. And time is up. Okay, so I think they're basically tied very closely to some extent, but I don't think it will go much further.
So the influence of China continually grows very rapidly the last years, and China demonstrates the position to become a superpower #1 in the world. What about relationships between China and the European Union? It is interconnected through massive trade and investment flows that produce huge wealth. In addition, the field of common views regarding finding peaceful solution in crisis regions like Eastern Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Middle East. What about NATO and China? We would like to say that China is not a part of NATO's official network of partners, but both seek of cooperation on topics like North Korea, South China Sea, and counter-piracy. In terms of China-Slovakia framework, we would like to say that China's main interest, from our point of view, is in steel production facilities such as United States Steel, because it is situated on the east of Slovakia, and we also can tell that Chinese productions is cheaper than European production, and but China shows a competition to our domestic products. And thank you for attention.
So my name is Tatiana and I'm from Moldova. And I would like to say that China and the EU are the partners because European market is the biggest export market for China, and they also cooperate in the transport industry. They develop and improve their existing tourism and trade routes and develop new ones. They also cooperate in energy sector. They work together on developing eco-friendly solutions for environmental problems on the global level. They also cooperate in social issues like education. Many Chinese students can benefit from Erasmus Plus program. So my main point is that China and EU are the partners, and I would also like to say that a little bit regarding relationships between China and my home country. They are quite warm. I would say that China and Moldova has 61 cooperation agreements signed. They are about economic cooperation, about investment cooperation. They also about material help to our country, and there are also starting dialogues about free trade agreement between our country and China. So thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Now I would call Vezir Kasalchin from Sarajevo and Nikola Tucako from Belgrade to answer also the first question.
Shall I go first? All right. Well, when it comes to China's relationship towards the EU, we think that what's significant to mention is that China has been building its 16+1 network, trying to integrate Eurosceptic and East European countries into more of a common market and actively competing with the EU for the markets of these countries. Also, with its very significant One Belt, One Road initiative, it is trying to build a complex network of infrastructural projects, which will help China in furthering these economic interests. When it comes to China's cooperation with NATO countries, we think that the two key issues are the crisis in the South China Sea, where China is competing with NATO-aligned countries such as the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, when it comes to rights of passage and rights for economic exploitation of resources there, as well as joint military exercises with Russia in the near the Baltic Sea and in Vladivostok, which again shows clear signs of competing with NATO countries. And when it comes to China's relationship with Serbia, our country, we have seen a strategic partnership signed with our country in 2009. We have seen a large number of Chinese infrastructural projects and investments, which are mostly done by way of easy loans. Our country also the Serbian government also tends to overstate the importance of China's economic partnership with Serbia, even going so far to convince up to 21% of people that China is Serbia's greatest economic partner when it is actually the EU. What's key to mention, we believe, is that Serbia's government believes China is a key partner for Serbia because of China's permanent position in the Security Council of the UN. This allows China to block the international recognition of Kosovo, which is one of the main foreign policy goals of the Serbian government. Thank you.
So, in my opinion, I would say that the China is actually not an opponent of the NATO and the EU. Rather, it is considered as a partner, but as an alternative to the EU and USA relations. However, we can say that the China is basically doing that partnership in its own interest to expand its own market on the EU, and to expand also the investments that are going to be actually invested in the European Union and the countries of the European Union. When it comes to the Bosnia and Herzegovina, we can say that Bosnia and Herzegovina is at least involved in these investments. However, we can say that 16+1 agreement and the infrastructure of the road that is going to be constructed, Bosnia is also a part of it. And we can say that China was investor in the Bosnia and Herzegovina by building the thermal block in Bosnia and Herzegovina, somewhere around the Sarajevo. China is basically showing this to the by its investment. It's showing to the European Union that that it will kind of give its partnership. She is actually. She's ready to be a partner with the European Union by giving the investments to the countries that have a low economy, and by that way is increasing their economy by the investments and all other means that she's willing to give to them.
Okay, thank you. Now we are going to start with the follow-up questions from the audience. I would like to call the teams from Bratislava and Podgorica to choose one of their teammates and to answer the follow-up questions. Yeah, in this first round, we are only answering the first question, so the follow-up questions are going to be addressed to them. And the person who answered the first question cannot answer the follow-up questions. Some other members of your teams have to answer. And for answering these questions, you have 1 minute. Bratislava. Okay, first I would like to ask the audiences, do they have any questions? Novi Sad? Banska Bystrica? Feel free to ask questions. If you don't ask questions, I will have to ask one, so.
Here in Banska Bystrica, we want to ask question.
Okay.
How do you think Brexit will change the relations between European Union and China in economics and other ways?
So I believe that the first thing really important to note is that if Brexit happens in a way which we have aligned now, it will definitely lower the economic power of the European Union, but it will definitely destabilize the European Union. And a destabilized European Union is definitely something which is going in China's direction when it comes to global dominance, especially in terms of trade. So definitely I can say that the issue of Brexit and the issue of all the events happening with Euroscepticism inside the countries of the European Union is definitely something which will affect the relations between China and the European Union, in terms that it will lower the power of the European Union and definitely give way to China to establish its economic monopoly even further.
As my colleagues say, that if the Brexit happens, yes, the European Union will lose the economic power, and that does strengthen the China. But I think that the position of the EU will now change, and I think I can't say something new. I think my colleagues say everything what I want.
Now the teams Moldova, Novi Sad and Banska Bystrica. Okay. Do you have another question? Okay, if not, I will ask the question. How do you think that United States of America and China economic disputes will affect the EU, and is someone going to benefit from it? You can start to have. Okay. How do you think that the USA and China economic disputes will affect the European Union, and is someone going to benefit from it, from the dispute between China and the United States?
So not only China is affected by the U.S. sanctions, also Europe is affected by U.S. Well, they have a dispute a trade dispute between US and the EU. So it is like US is basically giving China into the EU's embrace, so they would cooperate more. And nothing is a better cooperation than a common enemy. Was it about economic, in the economic aspect, or more in the political aspect? The question, just.
I think you answered everything. I just want to, before you answer, I would like to say that the students here also can ask questions. So,
from our point of view, I think that if they are fighting two great superpower in economic field, for example, China and the USA, the third party will win. So that's the European Union. That could be hugely beneficial from this fighting of the two major economies in the world. And the second point is to address about that China and USA are interdependent economically from each other, and European Union as a third party will be great beneficial, and it will economically grow starting from this first wave of the sanctions between those two countries.
I think that America and China are very economically strong and very they have a lot of power. So I can agree with our colleague that the European Union can benefit a lot from the misunderstanding of USA and China, and because they depend on the bigger powers in the world. I think that China, United States, and Russia will always be on one side opponents, and on the other side that they need to cooperate because there are very big global issues that they need to comprehend together and to find a result for it.
and now the final follow-up questions from this round. The students from Sarajevo and Belgrade are going to answer. Okay, so is someone going to ask the question? Bratislava, Banska Bystrica, Moldova. If there are no questions, okay. Can you just wait for someone to give you mic?
So my question would be how Project Belt Road Initiative will influence China's relations with EU and the NATO?
I suppose that's a question for me, yes? Okay. Are you going first? One, two. Okay. Well, we think it will influence because China is making a big market with 16 plus 1 countries that are basically Eastern and Central. I'm sorry, they're Eastern and Central countries that are most Eurosceptic. So I think that will influence on the EU because EU is trying to bring those countries under its unique umbrella market, I would say. Thank you.
We actually already have real examples regarding this question, and that is the joint attempt of the Croatia, Hungary, and Greece in blocking the UN joint resolution regarding the South China Sea and the territorial position of the China on the South Sea. Actually, they jointly blocked resolution of the UN stating that China should not have a territorial interest in this part of the sea. And another example is the blockade of the Hungary blocked recently the UN security resolution regarding the human rights issues of the China and their disrespect of the rights of the political activists in the China. Actually, we can see that the China is through the investments directly promoting its political interests in those countries that are receiving the grants and the credits for their infrastructural progress.
Thank you both. I would now like to ask the audience here and also in other universities I will ask you to raise your hand if you think that the students answer the questions. First, about the Bratislava team. Just raise a hand if you think that they answered the question properly. You too. Yeah, you can also go to your seats and you can vote from there. Okay. Can I see the hands? Okay. Okay. Then what about Podgorica team? Okay. Moldova team? You can vote for yourself, it's fine. Novi Sad team? Banska Bystrica team? Sarajevo team? And Belgrade team? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now we will immediately start with the second round. And you're going to answer the question, is there any space for engagement of EU, NATO, and the US with Russia? If so, in which issues? And will the ENF treaty be a serious problem, or do you think that an agreement can be reached? I would first like to ask Belgrade and Banska Bystrica, Sofia Popovic from Belgrade, and Alexander Karpineau, if I'm sorry for mispronouncing this, from Banska Bystrica. You have 2 minutes to answer the question.
Hello. You want to start? May I start? Regarding the INF Treaty, there are many scenarios that will shape further relation of West and East, but our team has set 3 main ideas that would somehow influence them. Firstly, on the one hand, Trump has claimed that he intends to withdraw the United States from the treaty because of Russian non-compliance with the treaty, long-term non-compliance. But on the other hand, analysts say that this is linked to the recent Chinese arms build-up in Pacific. So this is just a move to maintain strategical position in South China Sea. Firstly, if United States withdraw from the treaty, this would open doors for Russia to produce to deploy such missiles in other regions, and this is not convenient for the alliance. Secondly, this would trigger arms build-up and arms race between states that will be similar as Cold War style. And finally, such withdrawal of US from the treaty is convenient for Russia because they would possibly blame the US for killing the treaty. Therefore, they will gain legitimization from the Russian population in this aspect, and it's convenient for them. In conclusion, we like to highlight the idea
that an agreement should be kept on this topic, because we would like a democratic society, and the importance of this treaty has a significant factor that it has improved relations between East and West in 1987 in Cold War. Thank you.
Okay. Considering the trends we've observed in recent years, we consider the space for positive engagement between EU, NATO, and USA on one side and Russia on the other side to be severely limited. While there is a degree of economic cooperation, notably in the field of energy between European Union and Russia, these two sides have failed to provide a united response to global issues such as North Korean nuclear threat and the Paris Agreement on climate change. Additionally, we have seen political tensions rise in the poisoning of ex-Russian agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter. When we talk about INF Treaty, we believe that this agreement can be reached, especially because the agreement doesn't include China as important nuclear power. Furthermore, any enlargement of the treaty to include China seems very unlikely, given that the weapons in question constitute 19% of China's nuclear arsenal. Therefore, we think that this isn't reasonable to expect whether new agreement to be reached, and a more dangerous global situation is ahead of us.
Thank you both. Now I would call Bratislava, Novi Sad, and Podgorica. Ana Brisudova from Bratislava, Dunja Funduk from Novi Sad, and Marko Milikic from Podgorica. No, then he can answer the follow-up questions.
So hello, may I start? My name is Anna. I'm the representative of the students from Bratislava, and I would like to present our standpoint towards the question that was mentioned. We identify ourselves more with the standpoint that that EU, NATO, that EU, NATO, and the US there can be reached some more engagement because of the. And I would like to give some more arguments to defend our opinion. Why do you think so? Firstly, it is well known that after the Russian invasion to the eastern Ukraine, in the case of illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014, the relations between NATO and Russia somehow cool off, and NATO imposed the sanctions to Russia and restricted the conversation with the country. Another serious move in NATO and Russia relationship are military maneuvers organized by Russian Federation. The latest one that was actually 2 months ago in September that took place in Vladivostok in 2014, and that also already mentioned in here. That was the biggest one since the end of the Cold War, and the event attended 300,000 military of the Russians. Armed forces, including soldiers from China and Mongolia. And NATO presumes this act exposed Russian intention of the invasion of Baltic states that could possibly escalate into maybe a large conflict, actually maybe in the global war. So we consider
Marko Milikic, representing the Faculty of Political Science, University of Montenegro. When it comes to the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, it's very important to underline the reasons why Donald Trump, as the president of the United States of America, wanted to withdraw his country from the agreement. Firstly, the US believes that the agreement is a dead letter because Russia is not following certain terms of the agreement. And on the other hand, China is a very important factor. We believe that it's really important to preserve this treaty or maybe modify it in some ways because it can cause a complete destabilization of NATO itself. The EU members of NATO, the European allies are strongly connected with approval of this agreement, and they want the US to remain in the agreement. And the US, by pulling out of the agreement, can definitely cause some insecurities and destabilization inside NATO itself, that is within NATO. So we believe that it is important to preserve the deal, but we don't believe that a deal as it is right now can be preserved. We believe that it's really important to modify the deal because we can say that it is in decay. Many modern thinkers, such as Kissinger, thought that this agreement has definitely been or outdated, and in that way it is really important to add some new terms. China is a new force. China is one of the greatest economic powers in the world, seeking to be a complete global dominator, and it's important in certain aspects to also include China. And we can definitely put under question Donald Trump's ability, after the House was flipped by the Democrats, to withdraw his country from a previously Senate-approved agreement. So it's definitely a question whether Donald Trump has enough power after the House was flipped in the midterm elections to question this agreement. And it's also a question how the agreement can stay as it is without any inclusion of China in it.
Hello everyone, my name is Dunja Funduk. I come from University of Novi Sad. We are talking about agreements and two presidents, two persons, two men, and we are not talking about the people. We've forgotten that America is not Donald Trump and Russia is not Vladimir Putin. All right, they are here to stay, but we need some new faces of democracy and new faces of the negotiations, because if the faces we already know and we see every day could have resolved this situation, they would. President Trump acts like he knows what he brings to the table and he's not afraid to eat alone. So I think that they are not afraid to leave they were not afraid to leave UNESCO, so they will not. They are not afraid to leave any other alliance. But I think there is much space for negotiations when it comes to economy, when it comes to fighting terrorism. So I think new faces need to negotiate some new terms in order to make a world a better place.
Thank you. Now I will call Medica Focic from Sarajevo and Mary Kazako from Moldova.
Good afternoon to everyone. Again, my name is Medica Focic and I'm team member representative of the International University of Sarajevo and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Regarding my opinion and my team's opinion on the Russia and NATO relations, I would say that since the crisis in the Crimea from 2013, the position of the Russia in the NATO is very unpopularized, and the position is very affected negatively by their attempt to gain the part of the Crimea as their own territory. After this attempt, the NATO regarded Russia as aggressor, and therefore they actually terminated all NATO relations with Russia, which seems that Russia no longer have a NATO in the Europe on its own side. we can say that the answer of the Russia on this attempt is their connection with the Turkey by reallocating the pipelines of the gas from Turkey to the Russia, and stating that actually they have right now new partner members in the Europe. This is Turkey. And the second attempt is their relation with China. Well, in this month there should be military hassle between China and China and Russia, which is considered as the biggest military hassle after the Cold War. Well, actually, the Russia sends a clear message to the NATO. They have China and Turkey as their partners against the NATO. And also, I would like to say that the NATO is in this question also questioning itself what is the position of the USA inside the NATO, since the USA decided to give upon the INF treaty. I'm sorry. Also the USA sent a clear message that they no longer wants to be a part of this agreement, and they decided to be a solo players. I would say that in this game, all three sides, China, Russia, and the USA, are cheaters, and the NATO and Europe are they are betrayed by these three states. Why? Because all of them actually violated this agreement equally. They all made nuclear weapons that are accessing this range from 5,500 kilometers. And they all make a nuclear weapon that can be destroyable not only to these countries, but to the Europe as well.
Okay,
Therefore, the position...
I'm sorry, time is up.
Can I just finish the sentence?
Okay.
Therefore, the position of the Europe is threatened, because if it would come to the nuclear war between the Russia and the USA, it would happen on the European territory. Thank you.
I am Mary. Okay. Thank you. I represent Moldova. In a nutshell, if we speak about engagement between the US, EU, and Russia, we already know that there is engagement in the economic field, in the energy field, in the aerospace field. We know that EU has a geographical connotation with Russia, and being dependent on energy supplies from Russia, it has no other choice but to engage with Russia, even though they sanction Russia because of the Ukraine conflict. If we speak about NATO, no matter how much they criticize each other, NATO and Russia, they also do not have other choice but to cooperate. And as proof of that, we have the 2002 Russia-NATO Council created, in the framework of which they cooperated on issues like narcotics, terrorism, the Afghanistan issue. And to speak about the INF treaty, as it was already mentioned many times, Donald Trump said that he would like to withdraw the US from the INF treaty, but representatives of the US said that the Council would not allow him to do so, because INF is very important. However, the problem regarding INF is that no one of the signing parties respect the INF treaty. And we know that US develops missiles. We know that Russia has missiles. China also commented Donald Trump's decision to withdraw the US from the INF, saying that in their opinion, it is not favorable, it is not desirable, but US representatives say why China not being a part of the INF treaty, because we know that Russia and the US are parties. Why isn't China bounded by some agreement of that type, but the US has to be? And in my opinion, in the opinion of our team, it would be highly desirable for them to reach an agreement in the short term, but we do not see it happening soon.
Okay, thank you. Now we are going to start with the follow-up questions in this round, and I would ask teams from Belgrade and Banska Bystrica to choose their representatives. Okay, first, are there any questions in in other cities and other universities. Do you have questions in this round?
We have a question in Banska Bystrica. My question is, do you think that we can expect in future open conflict between NATO and Russia?
Have you heard the question? Do you need her to repeat the question or it's fine? Okay.
So the question is about some possible Cold War. Again, I heard like that. No. Okay. Yes. With NATO and Russia. Okay. I don't think that it is something which is possible in near future because I think that in 2014 maybe there was a probability of that because of Crimean crisis. But after that, I mean, that was something which was very difficult for NATO to not to accept, but not to make a further conflict with Russia. So when they didn't do that, then I don't think it's possible to make some open conflict later. I mean, now or in 10 years or something like that. I think that things are going to be better, and the cooperation maybe is likely to be achieved.
Okay, so it is well-known fact that one of the most significant conflicts in Europe is definitely the conflict in Ukraine, as well as the annexation of the Crimea by Russian Federation. Despite the fact that the annexation of Crimea was done without the resolution of the UN Security Council, there was no space for direct conflict between the NATO and between the Russia because Ukraine is not a part of the member states of NATO, so which means that Article number 5 cannot be implemented. Well, the problem can be when Russia will decide to overstep the borders of Ukraine and will try to spread ideological and political framework through military activities in Central and Eastern Europe. There can be potential space for open conflict, but from our point of view, there is less likely to happen, as my colleague mentioned before. And secondly, in September 2018, there was one of the large military training that took place in Siberia, and it called Vostok 2018. And there also can be a potential space for open conflict because NATO sees this military training as a provocation and hypothetical threats in the case that Russia will decide to overstep the borders of Baltic states. So according to treaty, North Atlantic Treaty, there is a huge possibility that it can happen. But
Okay. I'm sorry, your time is up.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Now I am calling teams from Bratislava, Novi Sad, and Podgorica to send their representatives. Okay. Are there any more questions? Okay. Yeah.
We've got a question in Banska Bystrica. Can you hear us?
In the next round. Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
How could you comment yesterday's provocation in Azov Sea between Russia and Ukrainian military ships when 23 Ukrainian sailors were captured, and about today's United Nations decision about that question? Thank you.
Okay, so it is working? Yeah. Or? Okay, it's working now. So yes, I heard that yesterday was like a big issue when the three ships of not only three soldiers, but I heard that three ships of the Ukrainian army were captured by Russians. But I'm not really sure about what UN said about it. So if you can get us more information about it, or do you have some information? Yeah. So if you can describe what the UN said, because
it is early morning and we didn't even read the news today. So
For their defense, they were traveling the entire day yesterday, so without Wi-Fi. Okay. Can you say something more about this question, or we can maybe ask another question?
But if you can say more.
Can you elaborate more your question,
about the UN,
especially about what was the statement of the UN?
Excuse me, shall I repeat?
Hello.
Can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
And this is not working microphone. Yes.
Banska Bystrica, can you hear us? Can you please repeat? Can you please
Can you hear
elaborate
us?
more? Yeah, we can hear you.
How can you what can you say about the yesterday's situation in Azov Sea, like perspectives? What can you see?
I'm sorry. We heard the question. Can you just please elaborate what was the statement of the United Nations?
It wasn't yet. Today they're going to make their decision.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Like what they're going, what they're going.
You can
what
just
do
speak about what you expect. Yeah.
what is expected?
Yes. So actually, oh, now it is working. So actually, I can pretty much say that the UN will or won't be happy about this incident in Azov Sea. Of course, I'm waiting that UN will trying to get the ships and get the sailors back to Ukraine, and also there can be some more sanctions against Russia, or something about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I also believe that there might be some more restrictions towards Russia, and they probably aren't generally happy with what happened, but I didn't heard of it, so I can't tell you more.
Yeah, I would like to repeat what they said, that because we weren't informed about what happened, that the UN will probably sanction Russia, and that they are not happy.
Okay. Thank you. You managed well regarding the circumstances. Okay, now the teams from Sarajevo and Moldova. Sarajevo and Moldova, can you? Yes. But then you cannot be in the round 3, so decide. Okay.
Is from Moldova. You took.
So my question is asking about your stance on Russia increasing their military and nuclear ammunition in Kaliningrad. So this is according to information gotten from satellites from last summer, and as well on NATO's military simulation in Norway, in northeastern part of Norway, close to Russia, this fall. So it's very recent.
Who is going for you? Okay. So I would say that we can look of the both sides, that there are provocations. So Russia provokes the NATO, and how the NATO actually conducts their experiments, how they conduct their military, military preparations, and also the NATO considers that Russia is provoking them by doing the same thing. And in one statement, even the Vladimir Putin said that everything that they do, they will take as a countermeasure. So when they do something as a military preparations, they will do the same. If they produce the missiles, they will do the same. So because they see that as a threat, and they see that as a threat to their integrity and to their borders.
Okay, so I'm a representative from Moldova, and actually we see here the counteractive engagement of NATO and Russia. So I agree with your previous statement. When NATO allocates their troops and some military forces, Russia is doing the same. Well, right now, NATO allocated their troops and military training in Estonia, Latvia, Norway, and Romania. But in the same time, Russia decided to increase the military force in Kaliningrad and Baltic Sea. Also, as Vladimir Putin said, when NATO only thinks about allocation their forces, Russia is already ready for this in their areas. So thank you.
I have more questions for you. Okay.
Okay, so my question would be, wait from. Okay, so my question would be if now we understand that the INF Treaty is in danger, but what are the steps that need to be taken to save the INF Treaty if it can be saved at all? So that's.
You or me? Okay. So when it comes to the INF Treaty, I can say that unfortunately, I'm not trying to be pessimistic now, but it cannot be saved due to the fact that both of the sides are doing the violations to that treaty. So you cannot say that okay, we are going to save as one party while the other party is doing the violations. So when they are both doing the violations, it cannot be saved, unfortunately. And how the NATO says about it, that they cannot see the bright spot of that treaty because the one party is actually breaching that INF treaty and the other one is staying safe. So I don't think it can be saved at all.
Well, about INF Treaty is now a really big problem because the party do not comply with that treaty, and actually they do everything they want on their sides. And who knows when they decide to strike the first blow. So about whether it is this treaty is can be saved. So I think that it can be saved if the parties attract some independent experts, for example, other countries who can monitor this conflict and elaborate some new version of this of that treaty and some new rules which would be suitable for both parties. Thank you.
We're talking about Russians here.
Are there any more questions in the audience? Okay.
Since the INF Treaty is not the only treaty regarding the nuclear weapon, do you think if we would not decide to save this treaty, how it would impact the other treaties regarding nuclear weapon and how it would impact all other countries that have actual nuclear weapon? What about, for instance, New START Treaty that should be renewed in 2021?
Well, you or me again? Okay. So I would say that it will create some specific imbalances when it comes to those treaties because we're talking about the actually the race in the military forces. So when you want to sign another treaty, then you will be skeptic about it because you breached already the one that you had, and you cannot engage in the new one. And I want to say that the violations that happened could also happen to the other treaties, but it doesn't have to be the case as long as we have the perfect standards and the provisions that are stated in the new treaties. And I can say that because a lot of gaps happened, a lot of gaps are still in the INF treaty, and maybe because of that the violations also happened, but I don't know about the future of these new treaties.
I agree with your statement, first of all. And one military sphere of the agreement is a slippery one, because each country has its interests in the world politics, and each one prefer to maintain their core interests. About the treaties, so if you sign one, so you in some sphere violate the now one, and also there will be a part when member countries of the treaty will violate the signing treaties.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Now we can start with the third round of our debate. Third question is, next May the EU elections are taking place. Do you believe that they will strengthen the EU? I would like to call first Novi Sad and Sarajevo. From Novi Sad, Bogdan Vinka. And from Sarajevo, Emir.
So, looking at the third question, we need to take 3 points that are very important to the European Union for the next elections. So the first point is that the current popular parties in the European Parliament are starting to weaken, and that we can blame that mostly in the last 10 years due to the various crises that occurred in the European Union. First of all, a financial crisis at the end of the 2000s, the Greece crisis, the migrant crisis that is still ongoing, as well as the Brexit crisis. So my opinion is that the current ruling parties in the European Union did not answer to those crises as they should have. They did not provide a proper solution to those crises. So looking at that, we can then tie into the second point, is that the populist parties are starting to rise. And we can see that not only in the European Union, but also in the world, looking at the elections in the United States where Donald Trump is now president, looking at Brazil just recently where the right-wing parties are now holding power. We can see that the European Union is living through similar events through Austria, through Sweden, Hungary, and mainly we contribute that to the fact that these populist parties, the right-wing parties, are providing quick and fast solutions to the people, and they are also taking that role as a new face of the European Union, something that the people are desperately searching for, and something that they are taking advantage of. We can also look at the third point, and the fact that Angela Merkel is retiring, and this could strengthen the EU, and the fact that a new face could arise that would unite Europe again. But also we can look at the disadvantage, the fact that a top face such as Angela Merkel is leaving. Who will replace her? That is the main issue, and I think that the next elections will be a big hit for the European Union, but I think that they can bounce back from that in the future, and that they can retaliate in a proper way.
Thank
you. So I'm Bogdan, and I come from the University of Novi Sad. I think that the elections for the European Parliament next year is going to be very important, because there's a lot of Euroscepticism in the population of Europe. I think more than half of the people think that European Union is going in the wrong direction, and one of the problems is the migrant crisis. And I think that one more problem is the thing that some of the main European institutions are not transparent enough. So the problem could be too that not a lot of people from the European Union go to elections. Brussels is now trying to put 30 million euros into trying to get more and more young people to come to the elections. And there was one more strategy that was regarding the local elections in Spain, Lithuania, and Belgium. I think more people should go to the elections, and the more the parties need to try to make alliances between countries. We can see, as our colleague said, that a lot of populist parties are growing in the Europe regarding these issues, and I personally don't think that. I think the European People's Party will still win the elections, but that the right side of Europe, the populist parties, will grow a lot stronger. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you both. Now I would like to call Moldova, Podgorica, and Banska Bystrica. Diana Lesnik from Moldova, Mia Zekovic from Podgorica, and Marek from Banska Bystrica. Okay. Then you can ask someone who hasn't. Okay, so you're answering the same question. You have 2 minutes each. Let's start.
So from our point of view, the European Parliament election will not strengthen the European Union, and I will build my speech upon 3 main points. The first point is that migration crisis is still present, especially in the thinking of common European citizen. Secondly, Angela Merkel leaves the European political scene, and that left Emmanuel Macron as a single leader of pro-European and pro-integration thinking. And he has a strong opponent in the European Union. It's Prime Minister of the Hungary, Viktor Orban, who is famous for his pro-Russian and Eurosceptical thinking. And this divides the European Union between the supporters of the Emmanuel Macron and his political thinking and the supporters of the Viktor Orban and Euroscepticism. The final point of my speech is about Brexit, which if everything will do again in plan, the Brexit will happen 2 months before the European elections. And that will rise a new wave of Euroscepticism, because if Great Britain can leave the European Union without any major sanctions or disadvantages, many of the European countries will look onto Great Britain as an inspiration how to leave European Union. In conclusion, I think, and our whole team can agree that this election will not strengthen the European Union, but at least will be the same. But most possible change is to weaken the European Union because of this polarization between Emmanuel Macron and Viktor Orban, and missing of the strong leader that European Union needs.
My name is Alexandra and I represent Moldova. Speaking about the next election, first of all, I want to mention that Parliament will not be the same because of the number of participants. 27 seats of UK is going to be relocated, and the big winners of them are France and Spain. Here I also want to mention the switch of power, how my colleague already mentioned, from Germany to France, which leads nowadays in the European Union. Also the problem that the future of Europe is going to be chosen and done by the citizens of the European Union who don't want to vote. So they have a tendency of non-voters in the European Union, and also they don't put enough attention on the European Union
European Union member states don't put enough attention on the elections of the European Union, but put more attention on the internal election, which are going to be, for example, in Brussels, in Estonia and Denmark. The election will be held before the European Union elections. And also the security of elections. They want to improve the system of elections. They want to make them more transparent, but in the same time, they have they have poor cybersecurity. There are a lot of attacks. For example, when we are speaking about Brexit, about the troll attack from the Russian Federation, which makes some fake news about the election and so on, they are not secure. The Europe elections are not secure nowadays. The next European Parliament will deal with problems as migration was mentioned before, with Brexit, with Trump politics, and also from the big and rising influence of China and Russia on the international market. The Balkans enlargement will be also a problem for European Union because our opinion is that Balkan countries need to think, is it European Union enough suitable for them? The future and the European Union depends from the choice of member state countries and the way which they will choose. Our position is, of course, European Union has a good and really beautiful future, only in case they will make it together, but not separately.
My name is Mia, and I'm representing the Faculty of Political Sciences of Montenegro. So on this question, we cannot, as a team, give the radical actually answer or exact. Let's say it is on one side good for the EU and for the strength of the EU, since one big force in the EU, France, will have 5 new seats in the Council, as the colleague mentioned before and previously, the relocation of the seats, but on the other side we have the separatism as the phenomenon that will actually that we will come up with after the Brexit, since this phenomenon is going to have let's say the production of the problem in the European Union. We will have the rise of actually the separatism in the parliament, so we will have not actually that firm structure of the parliament because of the newly structured states that and separatism that will have the impact on the structure of the parliament. On the other side, we will have let's say the phenomenon of Euroscepticism that is already mentioned, because nowadays we have extremely rightist committed parties in Germany, let's say, as the big force of the European Union, and that's why we have the rise of the Euroscepticism that will not actually, let's say, strengthen the European Union as the alliance and the force of the world.
Okay, thank you all. And then we have 2 more teams left, Bratislava and Belgrade. Bratislava, Denis Kalman. And Belgrade, Neda Trifunovic. You have 2 minutes each.
Okay, so I think I will be more optimistic. I hope that the next election will strengthen the EU. I think that the next election will be crucial for the new development of the EU. The rising of populist and Eurosceptic party in the nation states. It's quite an issue for the EP. So even the biggest party, the EPP and the Social Democrats, will lose at least 50 chairs, according to Martin Center, there's a political think tank. But in order to secure the election to European Parliament, the EU already paying the big amount of money to increase the knowledge about the EU elections, and with the focus on young people. Even our team has a candidate for the chair of in the European Parliament, and we can see it also in Slovakia with the worst participation on the EU election, last EU elections, around the 13%. So I think that to secure next European integration, we need pro-European MPs to more integration. Thanks.
First we consider that the EU won't strengthen or be weaker after the elections, because we have the impact of the past elections, where we see that the EU didn't change a lot. Even that EP is important as a democratic element of the EU, sure they don't make a bigger decisions as the European Commission does. On the other hand, we have the populist parties that are growing in many nations, but we don't think that they will jeopardize the EPP, European People's Party, this next year on the elections. We don't expect a bigger turnout on this election in comparison to past elections. Also we have, on the other hand, that people don't know that there are elections in the next year, because they're apathic and not interested. So we firmly believe that the biggest things to make EU stronger will be the changes that will be on the European Commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we will have the follow-up questions. I would kindly ask you to choose a team member who hasn't participated till now. So we have Novi Sad and Sarajevo. Okay. Do you have any questions? Bratislava, Banska Bystrica, Novi Sad. Okay, if we have no question, maybe later. Then we can have.
So my question would be, how do you think that the issue of separatism, such as Spain, Belgium, more or less southern Germany and northern Italy, will affect the European elections for the parliament in 2019? And do you think that the EU is strong enough to handle those issues?
Okay. Can I elaborate wider that question? I think globally
If you can elaborate it wider in 1 minute, then it's fine.
Yes, globally we can see state-centered politics, meaning that in this geopolitical flux, there's a new strategy to center the state as a new locus of power. It's like nationalism, and everybody is doing it. France, Emmanuel Macron, who's saying that we have to, in all respect to USA and China, we have to defend ourselves with the EU army. I don't know how is that going to work out because of Brexit, exiting the EU. And now UK was America's go-to country. And now they're left with Angela Merkel on Germany. And I think they are realizing they are losing an ally because Southern Europe wants to water them down because they don't have a problem with Kremlin, and I think Europe can handle it.
So, hello everyone, my name is Mariam Berkovic and I'm coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So, about my opinion, I don't think so that Europe can actually handle something like this because of Euroscepticism, which is rising like across all of the states that are actually taking part in Europe. So basically, I don't think that something like this, because people are actually left in fear. So like they want, according even, for example, to the last survey that was done in this year in April. So 27,600 people across Europe were took a part in voting. So what they said, like 44% of them said they actually fear of Europe and that actually Europe is headed in a wrong way. Well, 33% of the people actually said that Europe is going like in a good way. Basically, probably those people are like more biopolitically like engaged. So basically they don't understand actually what's going on in the world. So yeah, regarding everything what's going on right now, and even like previous two questions that we already answered, I don't think so that Europe will actually be able to handle something like this. But also what I think is people fear, so maybe they will like still vote for euro because there's nothing better that the world is giving them right now. So like Europe is at least like the best solution from the worst one. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any more questions for them, or we should start with the next teams?
Do you think that a lack of transparency that is right now present in the Europe actually created the Euroscepticism in the Europe that people feel toward their representatives in the European Parliament and Commission?
Can I answer shortly? Yes, it's logical. It's logical.
So what I would like to add on it is the rising of populists. So basically what people are looking for is a new face. So what they found is on the right parties, like they found new faces who are giving them something like better solutions, like really fast and quick solutions that they can actually solve the problem. So regarding this, like, yeah, people do believe in them, although I don't think that something like this will actually help Europe to survive. It's just like like something new, something what's in right now. Anything else?
Okay, thank you. Now. Okay. Now I will call Moldova, Podgorica, and Banska Bystrica. Okay, any questions from the audiences in other universities? Okay.
In recent times, European Union adopted a law which increases the transparency of the election, but also EU risks to face with the hackers attacks such as fake news campaigns. So, in your opinion, which measures the European Union is going to implement in order to protect itself from cyber attacks?
Okay, you can. You wanted to start? Okay. If you want, you can. Okay, okay. So the matter of cyber attacks is a matter of programming. So EU's decision would for sure be much more investment in that side, so they can prevent people from hacking their systems. But inevitably, there would be someone that could hack EU's computers and informations. Because of that, we think that EU need to implement some laws on the right of fake news. Right now, there is some indications that censorship would be imposed, but that is against the free speech law and against all that concept. Because of that, it is a huge problem. And now, at these times, EU is having policies that are going to implement more, I don't know, they want to suppress the fake news by the by programs and by channels that are specializing for categorizing fake news, and we think that is the best way that EU can fight with these problems, because by my opinion it is the only one, and that's it.
Hello, can you hear me, right? My name is Ihor Sobol. I'm the member of team from Banska Bystrica. And just like my colleague said, first of all, European Union should attract more specialists in the field of cyber protection, of course, to prevent the spreading of fake news, first of all. Second of all, in my opinion, if just like my colleague said again, there is a possibility to hack anything you want. So in this case, European Union should, countries of the European Union should inform their populations, their population citizens about the possibility of spreading the fake news and I don't know. I think that's it. Thank you.
As what regards cyber attacks and fake news, it has been proven by the situation in the US and as well as Brexit that the Russians allegedly used troll farms located in St. Petersburg to create fake news, to create some diversions in the public opinion, so that allegedly influenced Brexit and the elections in the US, making Trump president. As well, why would Europe need to be more transparent? Yes, because most of the Europeans have a very unclear perspective on Europe, because Europe is such a complex governing body. Most Europeans don't understand how it is working. So, for example, let's take the Spitzenkandidat from the majority party or the alliances in the European Parliament. People don't really understand what this is implying because has not been translated into other languages of the EU. And as well, it also takes a long time to translate all of the decisions, everything that is going on in Europe, so that everyone in Europe understands what it is going. So just because it is so complex, people just don't have an interest in all of this. So yeah, we do need to make it more transparent and more easily understandable for all the Europeans, but as well, we also need to take care of the cyber attacks. It's both ways to improve the elections this year.
Thank you. Any more questions here? Okay, then I will call the last two teams, Bratislava and Belgrade. Okay, do you have any questions from other universities? Are there any questions here from the students?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I have a question. Considering the last European Parliament elections, voter turnout and the constitution of the European Parliament with European People's Party and Party of European Socialists, do you really believe that there is a space for such as populism or Euroscepticism in the European Parliament, or will it be shattered after the European Parliament elections in 2019? Thank you.
Do you want to do it first or me?
Oh, you can go first.
Okay, thank you. So should I turn around to talk to everyone? Oh, okay, sorry. So last but not the least, team members. So I would like to say that unfortunately we are aware of that populism is a political trend which is rising, unfortunately, but there will, our opinion is that there will be no changes because the biggest changes will happen with the changes of European Commission. So unfortunately, we are aware of that the numbers of mandates that get those parties will, get a lot of more numbers, but will not endanger the European People Party. So that's all. Thank you.
Well, for me, I think, yeah, phenomenon like populism is present also in European Parliament. And to answer the question, I don't think that this is going to be that widespread problem. I think major parties like socialists and of course European People Party are going to basically harmonize the space. And of course there is going to be a problem making coalitions. It is going to be tougher. It is going to be on the negotiators to reach the deal between those two parties. And of course I think that yeah, maybe the situation will be more complicated as it is now. But these two key major parties, as I said, are still big enough to make the European Parliament space really harmonized for discussion, even with those smaller populistic parties on the scene.
Okay, I have a question for you. Do you think that EU elections will have an effect on migrant crisis, and what is going to be the newly elected EU officials' answer? Do you think that their policies towards migrant crisis are going to change, or is going to be the same or the worse?
Well, sure, we can expect a changing attitude toward migration, but European Parliament is not the only institution which has say in this matter. And of course, it's mostly on the national leaders in European Council. And yeah, European Parliament may be more supporting tough solutions, maybe radical solutions more than now, more than in present term. But I think that that attitude will be more on a basically on a cooperation, but the situation is going to be tougher to cooperate.
So since I'm an optimistic person, my views are optimistic, especially because there is Angela Merkel still. So we have like the leader who can handle these situations. And I think that even though the parties are going to become the part of the European Parliament, they're not going to be able to make like big decisions. They are going to block something, but they are not the main in the European Union. So there will be, I think, no big changes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions here or at the universities?
We have a question from Manska Bystrica. Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So the question is it possible to create a balance between the liberal powers and the right populist parties in the European Parliament, and which conditions should be done to achieve this result?
I didn't catch the question.
I'm sorry, I haven't.
I'm sorry.
heard
Can
either.
you repeat the question
Yeah,
once
of
again?
course.
And I would kindly ask all other participants to turn off their mics while you're asking the question.
Is it possible to make a balance between the liberals and right populists in a parliament, in a European Parliament, and under which conditions is it possible?
Any views?
I'd like to go first.
Well, okay. Basically, it depends on what is discussed. Actually, this is the main factor which is important if we want to think about connection between populists and liberals. I think the range of topics these two parties or these two families can have agreed on is not so wide as someone would expect. But yeah, maybe there are possible topics, possible issues. They may found the common standpoint.
Well, I think that it really depends, but on which fields they can cooperate. But there is always a possibility to cooperate. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now I would like to ask the audience here as well as at the universities to raise your hands and to give your opinion if you think that the students answered these questions. First, what about Novi Sad? Okay. Now Sarajevo. Okay. What about Moldova? Next one, Montenegro. Even though you have an expert, right? Okay. Banska Bystrica next. Okay, thank you. Bratislava. Are you raising your hands at the universities or you're still sleeping because it's morning? Okay. And finally, Belgrade. Okay, thank you. Uh, we are going to slowly wrap this up. I would like to thank to all the students and the university coordinators and their assistants for doing an amazing job and preparing the students. Also, I would like to thank Mesa 10 for all the hard work, and I would like to give a word to my colleague Lucia from Mesa 10.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Lucia Klapacheva from Bratislava, from Mesatan, from the organization who together with SEAS keeps putting together those discussions for quite some years now already, like 4, 5, 6 already. Okay, time flies. Anyway, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your participation. I'll still enjoy a bit of time which you have here in Belgrade in the great hands. And then I'll see you, I suppose, in Bratislava. No? Yes? In April? In spring? Banska Bystrica? Okay, so we'll go to Banska Bystrica and to Brussels. Some of you at least will definitely meet there. So keep on with the great work. What you were saying was very inspirational. I deal with foreign policy for many years. I would not dare myself to reply to some of the things you are asked to reply to. So we will have opportunities soon to check if you were right or not after the EU elections and all the other things which are going on. So this all is recorded, and you yourself can then later, next year, maybe see what you were telling, and if you're right or not. Okay, thank you once again. Thanks to all my colleagues, to Rastio, to Sandra, to Branko and Anja, and who else I should, our technical support as well. So, hey, enjoy.